Greetings and good morning, beautiful people all over planet Earth. I'm hoping my connection is fine here. It looks like we're excellent. However, let's just wait and see what happens. So back to the UFO files. So if you guys had followed me on my old channel before it was taken down by YouTube, infamous story right there. You will know that I was doing, kind of like a collection of UFO alien cases that really kind of struck me, and they're the kind of timeless cases that, with all my psychic feeling, there are absolutely authentic cases, and um, there are so many elements that determined that for me with Maurizio's case. Um, but this is his book that he wrote. He is Italian and does not speak English. I have had communication with him years and years ago that I use like Google Translate. Um, and I can't remember what I asked. I believe it was if he was still having um, current communication with um, the entities that he was involved with. I believe this book is very hard to come by right now. I bought this back in 2009. It is obviously, you can see I have definitely gone through it. I believe Jeremy, honey, were you the one that said it was very hard to come by? I can't remember if he actually managed to find a copy. But I will also say the translation is not very good. Obviously, you can understand the actual encounter and how this came about for Maurizio, but it's probably not the best of translations. But I understand. You get an idea of what actually happened. So much so, it's one of those timeless cases for me that I go back to, and it's usually the older ones that really kind of sit with me, because you got to remember, back in those times, technology wasn't as available as it is now. They wouldn't have had things like photoshops back in the 80s, because I believe these mainly occurred back in the 80s when he was a little bit younger. Here is a picture of him here, and he's an artist. He's got these fabulous pictures of these encounters, and he talks about these encounters that have absolutely broken down the life that he knew beforehand and how he views life now. So, hi everyone. Hi Mundo. Hi Kitten. Hi Ross. Hi Jessica. No, this is not the friendship case, Mundo. This is something completely different. But obviously, the friendship case is Italian as well. And you know what? Funnily, I do not find much on the internet about the friendship case anymore. And it's a real shame, because a lot of documented cases that were very, I guess, pertinent, like, you don't find them anymore. Like, the internet is so filtered now with bullshit, and I feel like a lot of misinformation, and it's almost as if people don't want to touch on these things anymore. It's because they get flagged, and I can understand that, because obviously I was talking a lot about things. I mean, I wasn't saying anything that hadn't already been disclosed on my channel. I'm pretty sure of it. Perhaps the only thing I can think of is the Tony Rodriguez interview, but even then, he has. Obviously, there was a lot in that interview that we covered that hadn't been talked about, but I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because there was a consolidation of so much information. I have no idea, and it's over. It's done. So that channel is long gone. Still no communication, no response, no nothing. But I'm not surprised, and I don't think any of us are. So I hope my sound is okay coming through here. And, so I want to talk about this encounter with Maurizio Cavallo. So Maurizio had, obviously had he in his words had a typically a very normal life up until these encounters with these, you know, alien humanoid friends that say that they come from a planet, or they are the Clarion race. So they come from a planet known as Clarion. And, here is a message from one of the beings. And this is the thing, they look like you and me. Some of them, obviously, some of them that he has encountered from the Clarion race. Some are not all from the Clarion race, but he does have pictures here showing some of them. Here is Sewell. I mean, look, if you were to see him on a street, you would not think he's an alien man, and this is exactly what they want. They want to be disguised. They want to merge in with humanity. They want to be camouflaged and be taken for human beings. It's the same with the Albert Coe case, which was back in the 1920s. Another one of those timeless cases that I would like to address at some point. But Zret was from Venus and Mars. They first went to Mars when their own planet Norca had been basically destroyed. And they first settled on Mars and then had more of their colony. I've got a red here. Oh, God, I hope this stream is okay. I'm so sick of being interrupted by my internet connection. However, so the second part of their colony ended up residing in the high mountain plateaus of Venus. And Zret had obviously his Venusian life, but his camouflage, his disguise, was that of a young man of Earth with an adopted family. His mother, he had an adopted mother, and he was studying electronics at university or something like that. But that's what I mean. They are very, very conscious of making sure that they are disguised within our Earth. They have to be, because how else could they do or observe the work that needs to be done? So anyway, this is one of the messages from Sewell. You will not find this in the book. He says, Sewell speaking, health to the earth. We are the children of Clarion, and we are in the world. Hear the voice of the stars, the throb of life in the universe. Discern the footprint of our footsteps in the dust of your planet. And it finishes with their language, Akui Akumse. And to me, that translates, not that I have had a translation, but I feel psychically, it means good day and blessings, or peace be upon you, blessings to you. So up until this point, Maurizio says it is an abduction. He says it's an abduction because he was taken. If he had a choice, he would not have gone through with it. And in the beginning, he had nothing but hate for them. He hated them. He hated how they took him on the brink of insanity. And, he lost his wife. He divorced. It completely broke down his entire reality that he knew of. And his hate soon turned into love, because had it not been for his encounters, he would not have been aware of the true nature of reality and the true nature of existence, and how there is so much more than what meets the eye, and nothing ever is ever what it seems on the surface. And so something that he hated in the beginning turned into an affection and love, because they taught him so much. He says here, I'm going to read a little bit. It all started on a mid-September night. It still hung in the air, the heat of a very hot summer, and there was a light rain smelling like dust and sweet gusts of wind. A Saturday night spent with friends in a restaurant and a car riding along the narrow streets on the hill. We had just arrived to a clearing and got out of our cars when suddenly the dark sky was torn from a burning shooting star. A fireball rose up from nowhere. We stood astonished and silently followed its strange revolving tilt with a fast approaching maneuver, and it descended on a poplar grove nearby. After a few moments, it disappeared, leaving a soft glow of orange red light all around. Amazed and excited because of the darkness, amazed and excited, we decided to go to the place where the object had landed, but soon, because of the darkness and the dangerous ravine, full of rocks and bushes and poplar groves, we were forced to give up. So they drove back home and they spent all the time talking about the strange incident and mulling over every possible explanation. So when it was about 11:15 p.m., he got home and he realized he was sick. This is Maurizio saying this. He said, "My head was spinning and I had violent bursts in my stomach. Very soon I doubled over in pain by a widespread cramping all over his body." And he said he's turning around. He says, "I turned around in my bed in great distress. I was cold and bathed in sweat. While I was struggling in total confusion, even with the inevitable noise I was making, and by my frequently going to the bathroom, trying to soothe my pain with fresh water, my wife and children went on sleeping with no problems. I called them many times in vain. It was strange for me looking at the light of the moon reflecting on their faces and seeing them frozen in a solid sleep that seemed inducted by sleeping pills. So they would not wake up. And he's saying he accidentally hit a glass full of water, and it hit the floor, breaking into pieces in slow motion, but there was no noise. He said the house was silent, and the silence was full of anguish and unsettling images. The walls were filled with strange shadows, and the usual traffic noise of a Saturday night was gone. I looked at the clock. It was 1 a.m. I did not know, but I felt that something was happening to me, and I started to struggle against the strangers who were trying to invade my mind. Something or somebody was ordering me to get dressed and go back again out onto the hill. Outside forces were making me do something that I did not want to do. Although I tried to resist with all my strength, I found myself in the car again, the engine already going and the wheels already rolling on the streets of Monferrato. He was afraid, and he said, "I thought about running away to go back to town and to go to the hospital, but I had forgot that resisting to the invisible ones is useless and painful." So he said he began feeling better the more he moved to the clearing of where he saw the initial UFO. But when he resisted or had thoughts of resisting, he would become sicker and sicker. He reckons it was about 4 a.m. and he wasn't sure of the hour because he was in a very bad condition. So he said, then it happened, and it was the most absurd, dreadful situation a human mind can experience or imagine. It suddenly appeared. A huge, terrible, impending ball of revolving fire was over me. Behind the flames, I could catch glimpses of a clear object shining like silver. In a fast and disconnected series of events, just like it happens in dreams, I felt I was moving back and forth. Every nerve in my body was shouting with grief and resignation. And he goes on. He obviously he went inside, and he said, "I had the impression to stay in the dome, a bell made of crystal or some sort of transparent plastic, and I could see through it to a surrounding area of incredible vastness." And then eventually, And it goes on. Obviously, it goes into deep out detail. But then he says, a voice came through, and it said to him in a hidden symphony, "Don't be afraid." The voice repeated, and it sounded as if it was coming from the deep depths, from beyond the borders of the galaxy. Um, anyway, he tries to express himself in this how he was feeling, and you can see that he would absolutely have been out of his mind. So this is how it started for him, and it completely changed his life, everything he knew of. And so they would turn up. They would turn up, and it was happening. Um, it was happening on a frequent basis, like more like 2 or 3 times a week. And so obviously that is going to affect you in your everyday life. And so one of these other encounters he talks about, which I believe are the Elohim that have come through with a message saying, "We know the history of the universe from the beginning of time, your history, the humankind history, and the history of the planet you call Earth. In very ancient times, so long ago that you cannot even imagine, we walked on the primeval ground of this planet, giving start to a project that is still in act. We sowed the life, well knowing the subtle cosmic dynamics, its laws and existence gears, planted the germ of a new race, and started to watch over it, to protect it, and correct it in its more difficult moments." The creators, the seeders, the gardeners. And he says the history that we have been taught, the star people have told him how erroneous, how wrong it is. So I also want to address one of the encounters of, like I said, um, there's some really interesting parts that I want to mention that I didn't mark. Obviously, I know where they are. And that's one of his encounters that happened with Sewell and Juela, which is phenomenal. And I will go into that in a moment. And it starts off as the Strange Patrol. So obviously, these beings, the Clarion people, they look like you and me. However, they have an intelligence. They have a wiring that is so profound and so much more advanced. I mean, obviously, they are not too much different from us. However, there are obviously some differences because they can do things that we cannot, or not yet, at least. Yeah, Ross says it's amazing that such info lasted online for so long. They're cracking down, and it's awful that they are cracking down, and they are in a huge way. Um, and this is how you know that it exists, simply by that alone. Of if it wasn't a big deal, if it wasn't something that the powers that be cared about, they wouldn't be doing this. We would have freedom of speech. We would have freedom to do as we please. We would have freedom to talk about these kinds of things. Um, so, and obviously, because we are not aware of the technology that our own private enterprises have, such as the military industrial complex. I'm not talking about them in general. I'm talking about the factions that are segmented of them, the private enterprises, Lockheed Martin, private groups. I'm not sure of who they are. I know there is another affiliation, the RIIA, the Royal Institution of Internal Affairs. Thank you, universe, because I thought I would have forgotten that, but I hadn't. There are so many confederations on our planet, confederations, so many groups, so many factions on our groups that are so um, invested in this that um, I saw a document. I saw a document dated back in the 50s, and the whole UFO issue is the most number one important issue in on anybody's list. And the fact that they are trying to clamp down only adds credence to this, I think. So after, years of this happening, and it is a fabulous book, and he has some incredible pictures on his website, which is clarioncentro.it, as in Italian. He has some phenomenal pictures. Have I got them here? Do I have the pictures? I don't have them here. But I did have a color photograph of Sewell, and he's taken a beautiful colored picture. If you go online, hold on, let me bring this up so I can see. If you go online, you will see these pictures in color, and it's like a glass ship. They are mirroring the reflection of their environment. And these beings become his friends, they become his family. And it seems to me that obviously he is a hybrid, and he has direct connection to their lineages or their race in some way, and he is now being made aware of that, or he is aware of that. You don't find much information online about him. Seems to be, I think he does post on Facebook every now and then, but not much. No Instagram, no none of that. And I can totally understand that, because we all know what that is, and there's already a saturation of that stuff. So let me go into the encounter that I love reading so much. This is just timeless. So this book, I don't know if you can find it online. Jeremy, when you see this, honey, I can't remember if you told me you end up getting the book, but it could be for like $200 or something like that. I can't actually remember. But this is a phenomenal encounter. And by this time, he is used of them in his life, and he's met many other different types of other beings. He talks about visiting the outposts on Mars, talks about how our ancestors were from Mars. He even says palm trees, our palm trees, like my date palms, tobacco and marijuana, coca, dates, all came from and originated from Mars, where they are endemic. They are indigenous to that planet. Isn't that phenomenal? No wonder I love date palms so much. So, we only have to see, you won't even see the face of Sedona now, which is on, let's have a look. I'm just going to see if I can bring it up. The face of Sidonia, or there's pyramids on Sidonia on Mars. Face on Mars. You know what they say now? I believe someone's got in there and photoshopped that face that is on Mars. Oh, look at that. It just happens to be in the last 20 years that face has eroded. Oh, come on. We all know that, erosion could not possibly have happened so quickly. Here's the face. I truly believe that there are so many other things that are on there. However, if you have a look, I don't know if I can bring that up. Let's see. Maybe. The image on Mars. Have a look. I don't know if it's called the Sidonia face. I just wrote the Sidonia face on Mars. I know there's pyramids on Mars. But, our ancestors are there still. Cosmic brothers and sisters. There's a whole industry. There you go. See that little face? Face on Mars. That's an old picture. Um, but now, when you read the news about it, they say that it's eroded. Of course they do. So, as far as I know, there is massive industry on Mars. Most of it is underground. And most of this isn't from information from this book, this is from other sources. That there is industry on Mars. It's all underground because the atmosphere is very unstable. Obviously, returning back to the Tony Rodriguez information, he talks about how colonized Mars is. But regardless of his information, I knew of this way long before, and that Mars is actually in charge of creating a lot of the ships in this sector of space, like the big ships. They create it on Mars, so they may not actually get the materials to make the crafts, but a lot of industry is happening on Mars, and there are a lot of people, a lot of Martians that are living on Mars, regardless of what you hear in the news. Because now, isn't it funny how a lot of any talk of Mars, it's now bringing Mars into people's conscious awareness. And so, I think the fact that if they ever come out with, there's life on Mars, it won't be as shocking because now there's talk about going to Mars, people living on Mars. It's becoming, if you've seen the movie Ad Astra, Brad Pitt goes to Mars. And Roy McBride, is that his name? Roy McBride. So it becomes, this is the way that, those in charge of these things on Earth, they are dribbling pieces of breadcrumbs to you, feeding you that this is going to be in our future. And I feel like it's a slight way of introducing these concepts into people's minds. So let me talk about this encounter, and it's wonderful. Let me go back to this main page for a minute. Hopefully I'm still live. Yes, I am. Very good. Have I had any notable interactions with the Saturnians? I'm feeling a strange pull to Saturn in general. Are the beings on gas giants different to those on terrestrial planets? Yes, they are. The Saturnians, there is a council, and they are the ruling council. There is a body, a ruling council of beings that are basically the law guardians of our solar system. They are situated on Saturn. And as far as I know, obviously we are affiliated and come from so many different types of star races. Well, of course we do. I mean, we are in it. We are in it. We are in this cosmos. Of course, we come from something. However, it is noted that or at least our recent direct lineage is coming from the Adamic race, and they are on Jupiter, and they are quasi-physical. They are not every single planet in our solar system except Mercury is inhabited. There is no native life on Pluto, but there is an incredible, like huge astronomical trading hub happening. And, we are taught to believe that Pluto is nothing but an ice planet. And in actual fact, it's a desert planet. It's full of white sand. And there is a massive industry. It is the main trading hub for this sector of space. You'll never hear about it. And this is why now, isn't it funny? Isn't it ironic that now our attention is moved away from Pluto? Our scientists and people in the know are basically saying or trying to detract our attention away from Pluto. And the truth of Jupiter is we will never see that because of the reflection of the gases and the atmosphere of Jupiter. It's just too blinding. You could never see this. And Jupiter, I don't even think we could imagine how big that would be unless we see it in person from a distance. I have seen Saturn through a telescope. So all these flat Earth theory people that are just gung ho believers on flat Earth and whatever, it's just such shit. It's such a crock of shit. I don't believe these people have ever gone out and looked at a planet with their own eyes through a telescope in live real time. It is the most phenomenal thing to see. I've seen it with a really high tech, high aperture, or big aperture, I should say, telescope, and to see Saturn like this big with its rings is just it just stirs things in you. And I can't imagine that those governing laws of governing laws of Saturn would be different from our Earth. A flat Earth and a fucking round Saturn. Oh yeah, that really makes, you know, sense. So, if you ever want to see these planets, invest in a telescope that has an aperture of maybe 8 inches is a good start. I mean, that's still very pricey, but if you're wanting something like a Dobsonian telescope that has like a 20-inch aperture, or even like a 30-inch, you're looking at about 20 grand. They're so expensive, but once you've started, it would be very, 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 very hard to let it go because you feel that much closer to our home, to our environment, to our cosmic brothers and sisters. Yeah. Okay. So let me talk. Let me read this to you because this is phenomenal. The countryside was running fast through the train window in a dying sunset. In its extreme spasm of color, the sun was low on the horizon, holding its last rays to an impending black night and to red mists on distant hills. That monotonous train car swinging and soft rail noise had put me in a sort of hypnotic slumber. Uh, Darkness was quickly coming while my train was winding on that unknown expanse and hid itself in a darker and darker landscape. In the silent warmth of my empty compartment, I tried to sleep, but I couldn't due to the anxiety about my mysterious impending meeting. So I went back to my thoughts and confusedly tried to think again about the last events. 1 week ago, on a day on that 1986 cold spring, I had received a mental order to go to my old clearing on the Monferrato Hills. I arrived to the place at 3:45 p.m. and waited. I did not know what would happen, whom I was waiting for, or the time of the meeting. Usually, my encounters with the Lords of the Stars, there had been 12 of them up until that point, were always rich of uncertainties and surprises. I only knew that when I received a psychic order, I had to leave everything and go. Sometimes I had not known the same place of the meeting, and they, the alien visitors, had driven me step by step through unknown roads, while I, in a sort of light trance, was driving my car for hours. I'd been waiting there for half an hour when suddenly I saw out of the corner of my eye a metallic flare. Among high clouds in the clear blue sky, I perceived something like a little silver object coming from the northeast direction. I held my breath, trying to sharpen my sight to realize what it was. It could be an airliner or one of the many little airplanes which often flew over that area. That place, in fact, was no more than 37 miles from the Torino Caselle airport, and the sky over it was a flight corridor. Many long minutes passed, and finally my doubts vanished when I could see, in all its mysterious beauty, a clear object quickly approaching my position. It was a dark silver disk at the distance of some miles and about 1,500 feet in altitude. It was slowly swinging, and sunbeams lit fire reflections when they touched it. Seen by that distance, it had the dimensions of the full moon. Suddenly, it sped up and lowered, disappearing behind grey clouds. Silence came with the sunset. A soft buzz and some noise from the bushes made me turn. Two figures were there, side by side, and stood motionless. Almost immediately, I could recognize them as Kama, who slowly raised his left arm and gave me his typical smile, not moving his lips, but smiling with his eyes, which gave me an immediate and solemn peace of mind. The other figure did the same in perfect synchronism. He was shorter than Kama, had a tan face and black long hair on his shoulders. He wore a dark leather-looking jacket with many pockets, like a hunter jacket, and under it I could see a high collar with a coal grey stitch. I was quite astonished when I saw he was wearing black velvet trousers and suede shoes. Kama, on the contrary, wore the usual translucent blue flight overalls I had seen many other times. When the two beings came close to me at a 5 foot distance, Kama transmitted his thoughts to me, and I knew his companion's name was Suel. He added they wanted to show me something and invited me to follow them. Unexpectedly, Suel talked, and I was startled with emotion. Sorry, let me turn that off. He said, "We left our vehicle among the trees in the clearing, you know." I was startled because Suel, differently from Kama, talked with his voice, emitting words through his mouth and his vocal cords. Moving his lips and smiling at my amazement, he continued, "Come, we don't have plenty of time. Before night falls, we have to leave." Don't be amazed. When the situation requires it, we can do this also. We can talk emitting sounds. Obviously, it needs a little more effort we are not used to, but it is amusing and interesting for us. We could not operate camouflaged among you if we could communicate only through mental synchronicity, telepathy. Do you understand? Dumbfounded, I heard the sound of his warm and pleasant voice. He spoke in perfect Italian, with only a very slight and strange foreign inflection. Confused and in deep admiration, I realized we had come close to their magnetic craft. It floated a few inches from the ground and was dazzling and very big. Perhaps it was the biggest I have ever seen. It was lens-shaped, 65 feet or more in diameter, with a large copper color flange in the middle. Flang or flange? A tall ball, about 13 feet high, sloped down in the center to join another flange, slightly narrower than the first one. From this second flange, every 25 to 30 inches, many glassy transparent tubes branched out, bent down, and formed some triangular sectors inserted in a low cap under the craft. Kama had come to that incredible object and softly passed his hand on the lower large flange. The metal became transparent at first and then immediately formed a large oval opening from which I could see the illuminated inner parts of the craft. A blinding green light enwrapped Kama as soon as he stepped in. By my side, Suel told me to follow him, and I submissively obeyed. When I was inside, a paradox once again hit my mind. As I had noticed in my many other encounters, space within the ship actually looked enormous, incredibly larger than the outside apparent diameter of 65 to 80 feet I had seen from the outside. Through a transparent and translucent floor, I could see a geometrical maze of brass-looking metallic tubes and bulkheads, and all along the circumference there were multicolored panels. Okay, yes, I'm getting to the encounter. My mind was trying to compare what I was seeing with my former encounters' details when Suel caught my attention, saying, she is Eluan, our Onhotima, or as you would call her, our route officer. So obviously, Eluan is a female being. Isn't that ironic that I used that name from my website or one of my websites? He smiled while bowing down, indicated to me a female figure who had silently come between Suel and Kama. Welcome on board, Eluan said. The pleasant sound of her voice went directly to my brain. She was dressed in a flight overall, similar to Kama's, but the color was a pale yellow. She had long brunette hair, and her rosy complexion enhanced her incredible oriental shaped green eyes. Kama, meanwhile, had left the group and was mentally asking me to follow him. He was standing in the middle of the craft, and I reached him while magically, after a strange and melodic sound, a sort of black cube rose from the floor to the height of about 5 feet. Its upper surface was a very dark blue, and its side had an oval cavity in its base. Kama touched it, and a broad golden edge protruded from the cube. It was plainly decorated with what looked like keys to a computer. Kama told me that the artifact was a much more advanced equivalent of our computers. Touching those keys, he communicated with the ship's brain. Immediately, I could hear many velvet sounds, and the cube's central surface became transparent and full of images. The images that Kama showed me were figures and sketches that quickly started to animate in a monitor. I could see some graphs, drawings, and finally very strange star maps. They all looked fluid with complex animations melted together to form a sort of tridimensional film. So, right, so what they gave him a disc. They gave him like a little size of an SD card, like a little black disc. And he goes on saying, the rattling, so now we're back on the train. The rattling noise of my train entering the station brought me to the present. A light rain had started to fall, and yellow light reflected on the railway. I felt as if I had many scattered bits of extraordinary and fascinating knowledge. These were my thoughts while my train left the station and threw itself in the dark night after a thick rain. In my memory, as it went back in time, and I thought again of that day from the previous week, Sewell had stopped talking, and I could see a veil of sadness on Eluan's face. Karma entered my mind and informed me they had to leave. They had to go away. I could still see many fast images on the monitor, and it reminded me I had brought a Polaroid camera with me. I had left it in my car, but I needed to prove to myself, if they would permit it, something of the incredible adventure I had been living for years with them. They read my mind, and Sewell smiled, saying, "Okay, it's all right. If Eluan wants, you will be able to take a photograph of her, but be quick to get your primitive camera because it's already late." So they allowed Maurizio to take photographs of them, and this is what the result is. And there's obviously a lot more on his website, but there are pictures with his Polaroid camera from them. And he talks about, with each picture that he took, there is some kind of light reflecting on them. And he says that their energies absorb the atomic light of photons or something like that. And so there was always a bright part that was featured on the image. So Eluan gently bent her head, and I turned back to go from the ship. Karma had gone before me and was waiting for me outside. Before I could reach him, Sewell said, "Wait." Here, he came closer and gave me a sort of black rectangular card, the SD card. It looked metallic, extremely thin, and very pliable, and it measured 1 or 2 inches. And when I touched it, I felt something like an electrical current. Bring it with you. Within a few days or a week, you'll have to travel, and you will meet me again. When it will be the right moment, he said, indicating that strange card. It will give you the correct instructions to reach us. Go now. Madames don't have to wait. And he laughed. They do have a sense of humor. I'm going to get into this encounter. They do have a sense of humor because I know from my own previous experience when I was so dumbstruck and so dumbfounded when I had this encounter with the being, the, the big man from Aldebaran that I would suspect is 8 or 9 feet tall. He was so tall. He laughed telepathically when I said to him, "Are you abducting me?" He found that so comical. He found that so humorous that I would. It's almost like a primitive thing to say that I would even use the terminology of him abducting me. And he laughed and he said all the time. This was all telepathic as well. So obviously they much prefer telepathy than using vocal cords. And he said all the time through his laughing. It's crazy. So they do have a sense of humor. Well, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? Um, the night outside was completely black. Okay, hold on. Sorry. Oh, he says here. So as they were giving him the disc, he saw the Polaroid picture forming and seeing Eluan's face on it. It was proof of his madness, is what he said here. Another train station. I looked out from the window. The rain had stopped. An elderly couple dragging 2 heavy suitcases were shouting at each other something I could not hear. They were hurrying to the train, and I hoped they would not come onto my compartment. Luckily, they went to another one. I looked at the half-empty platforms on that station, and I could smell misery and loneliness. A big clock showed the hour, 2:30 a.m. The station master blew his whistle, and the train moved again. I should have slept for a while, I thought, but bringing another cigarette to my mouth and looking for a lighter in my pockets, I touched the strange card Sewell had given me. I lit my cigarette and turned to look at the object. I turned it again and again and again, and I always felt that light and pleasant current of electricity. Nothing more. It could be well disguised as a normal and useless black thin coaster, but, as they had told me, it was for what I was doing now, traveling to a great town in central Italy, perhaps to meet the Star Children. Just a little background information that you will not find on in this book. Sewell, this big city, which he does not mention, which I found out through other sources, was Rome. And it turns out that Sewell, when I'll get into that, but Sewell worked in a bank. This is not information you will find in this book. Hello, Venus. So I did not know its use, this black card. I did not know how it worked. I only knew that by holding it in my hands, my mind was influenced by it, and I could receive clear details and information about what to do without mistakes. The dirty light of a new day reached me through the curtains, and my eyes opened on the mountain landscape framed in the black and white picture hanging in the wall of my compartment. I had fallen asleep. Now the train had slowed down and was screeching while it was finding its way through a tangle of shining tracks. Wet and long dark platforms suddenly appeared and slid at the sides of my train car, for I had arrived at my destination. Fresh morning air started to fill with voices and noises. Ordinary faces and dull eyes of homogeneous and hurrying crowds awakened me to reality. The train stopped with a large last jump, while an anomalous voice croaked something from a loudspeaker. I grabbed my poor luggage, a backpack which had seen better times, slowly got off the train, and confused myself among the crowd. It was 20 to 8 in the morning. Um, I went to the station exit in a certain anxiety. I had come to that big city, and I had no idea what to do. My black card remained silent and gave me no more information. I looked around through the mob, through that urban confusion that at that morning hour was already chaotic. I hoped to find some indication, some clue which could show me the way. The big town I will not mention for many obvious and less obvious reasons linked with the extraterrestrial visitors who live and work among us enwrapped me and intimidated me. I crossed a large boulevard looking for shelter in a bar full of people. I asked for a coffee and waited. Very long minutes turned to hours. And meanwhile, I gazed at the customers' faces, hoping to find out the sign I was waiting for. When the clock showed me 1:24 p.m., I fell into a spiral of humiliating doubts. What was happening? Why had they wanted me to reach that city? I knew they could abduct me and bring me anywhere anyway. So, as they had done many times, so what was the meaning of traveling by train? Was it something like a test? Did they want to verify my skills? Perhaps they wanted to know how subdued I was. All the weakness and frustration I had felt the night of my abduction was coming back. Somebody suddenly knocked from outside the shop window and made a quick gesture and ran into the crowded bar. Am I late? Sewell said, looking amused. All my fighting emotions broke down in that moment, and I had to force myself not to cry. So here, can you imagine this? Here is this alien man, Sewell, who has just come into this bar, coffee bar, and he is now sitting down beside Maurizio. And people around have no idea that this man is from another planet. That blows my fucking mind. He came closer and said he had been delayed by a trite bureaucratic problem. So I learned he was employed in a public administration office, but evasively he did not want to say more. So it turned out he actually worked in a bank. He added that his car was parked outside and that we had to go to his friends who were waiting. Outside the bar, we plunged into a foreign crowd filling the city streets. At about a distance of 165 feet, behind a corner on the left, there was an old black Ford waiting for us. And we got into the car and we left, diverting out of very distressing traffic jams. A noisy and colourful line of cars slowed us down for about 10 minutes, delaying our travel, but we finally got access to the secondary roads and I realised we were leaving the city. During the more relaxing travel through the outskirts of the town, I could better observe Sewell's appearance. He wore a brown velvet suit and his long hair was braided over the back of his neck. His eyes were hidden by black sunglasses. From the moment we had gotten into the car, there had been no conversation, and now I was starting to unconsciously perceive a lot of strangeness. A sudden thought lightened my mind. From the moment we had left the town, Rome, and we had taken that state road, no other vehicle had passed us, and looking at the windshield, I could see nobody in front of us. I instinctively turned to the back of the window, and there was nobody following us there either. In fear, I realized it was totally absurd on a spring Saturday afternoon that such an important state road was completely empty. It was like a remote desert road. It simply couldn't be because I knew that street was continuously run by heavy traffic, also at night time. But the weirdness was only the beginning. Automatically, while I was looking at the Roman ruin bridge on the left, I looked at my watch. Sewell looked at me, and I noticed another strange thing. It was only 1:45 p.m. It couldn't be. Perhaps my watch had stopped or had one in that bar where I had read 1:24. There were no explanations. 28 minutes to cover more than 55 miles. No, it just could not be. I was mathematically sure about how many miles we had gone because I had carefully taken a mental note of all the street signals, but I was equally sure that the bar clock was properly working. While I was nervously waiting for someone, I had continuously looked at that bar clock and it worked. Its pointers were moving, and I was sure my watch worked also. So, what had happened? I needed a rational explanation. And quietly, Sewell's voice filled the car. There are other explanations. Perhaps they are not so rational to you, but you must be sure other explanations exist. I was about to ask more when I saw two distant figures moving on the street. One of them raised an arm. While the car slowed down, I could see they were two traffic police officers, and one of them was waving his stick to stop us. Sewell parked in a road pullout and stepped out of the car, whispering to me I had to remain inside. In the rearview mirror, I could see him talking with the officers, but once again, my instinct noticed something irregular. All the car windows were open, but I could not hear one word of the outside conversation. Perhaps they were talking with very low voices, or perhaps the wind was bringing sounds to another direction. But there was no wind, and they were just much too close to me. All of that situation looked extremely odd. Everything was still. The trees on the hills, the vegetation along the road, every detail looked like it was not real, like it was a painting. Though it was a fine day, a glacial cold had come. I got startled when Sewell opened the door and entered the car. We left, and I followed on the rear mirror, the policeman figures getting more and more tiny. Before a turn of the road erased them from my sight, I had the sudden revelation. My unconscious showed me the truth with extreme sharpness. They had no motorcycles. Could you imagine seeing these police officers on the side of the road with no bikes, no motorbikes? Yes, these two patrolmen had no vehicles. How was it possible I hadn't noticed it before? They had neither car nor motorcycles, and the pullout on the road had no place to hide anything. From that moment on, Sewell became unexpectedly talkative and started to talk to me about the mental universe and atomic mass, frequency interactions among matter, molecules, and harmonized equilibrium, and about emotional frailty and logical thinking. He smartly encompassed physics, metaphysics, and ultraphysics, talking in a very cultured way about the philosophic and esoteric matters, always putting an accent on the visible, invisible equations. Then, talking about cosmogony and cosmology, he added that men like Albert Einstein, William Blake, and others he had asked me not to mention got in touch with some of the representatives of the Stellar Federation and learn many things about them. Learn many things from them. Well, that doesn't surprise you about Albert Einstein, does it? The same thing happened to Christopher Columbus, who, telepathically inspired and constantly followed by magnetic ships, perfectly knew where to go. He did not want to go to India, but he knew there was another continent, the same which later officially took the name America from Amerigo Vespucci. The truth was very different from the story reported in our school books. In Columbus's time, there already were many voices talking about a very rich new continent. These voices were confirmed to Columbus by star people who gave him some detailed maps. On those maps, the new continent was indicated in Spanish, like Las Maricas, the richest country, and the contraction of the words became Las Maricas, which was the true origin of the word America. Well, isn't that interesting? Sewell also added that many prominent figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Jonathan Swift were in reality extraplanetary people on missions on Earth. While I was listening, fascinated, Sewell's to Sewell's persuasive voice, I saw him slowing down in a way which made me understand we had reached our destination. We left that state road that, meanwhile, had again normally filled with vehicles, turned on a narrow path bordering a huge grazing ground, and, after about 330 feet, Sewell stopped the car and turned the engine off. I calculated that we had covered more or less 75 miles, and it was only 2:07 p.m. But there was no more time to be amazed. Sewell had deftly jumped beyond a wooden and barbed wire fence and was asking me to follow him on the grazing grounds. Pines on the grassy slope were swinging in the western breeze, and the hay and lime perfumed the air and brought me quickly to the underbrush. We walked for more than a half an hour, crossing agricultural places and alfalfa cultivations, meeting nobody apart from a dozen lazy pasturing cows. In an almost absolute silence, we went up and down many slopes, and without saying any words, I continued following Sewell, amazed by his vigorous and rhythmic walking. Many times he had to stop and wait for me, while I breathlessly tried to follow him. Then, after a stream, climbing up one more slope, we found ourselves on a small hill. Almost like a mirage, not far from us, among high holly trees and cypresses, a house appeared. It was a sober building of pale sand color with big windows and a gray rock porch. While we were covering our last few feet to the house, I perceived a presence in the shadow of the veranda, which was almost totally invaded by myrtle. The figure came in our direction, and she revealed to be a beautiful creature, almost like Dahara. So he had met another female being before, who he was struck by her beauty. She looked to be about 35 to 40 years old and smiled at us while she dried her hands on a red apron covering a little blue flower print dress. Her name was Joella, and Sewell greeted her in a strange way I had never seen before. Alternately, they put their straight arms on each other's shoulders 2 times. Then Joella turned to me, asked me if I was tired, and held my hand without waiting for an answer, and she drove us up some little stairs to the entrance. Then a man came out from the door, and I could have well mistaken him for Sewell's twin brother, and he was dressed in a tartan shirt and jeans. They resembled each other in an impressive way, only the age difference, because this newly arrived man looked just a little older than Sewell. He held my hand and said his name was Dahusha, or Dusha. Then he greeted Sewell in the strange same way I had seen just before and invited us to enter the house. Probably due to my tiredness, because I had spent almost a sleepless night on a traveling by train, or perhaps because of all those strange events hitting me, I started to feel dizzy and very confused. I could hardly follow what was happening and got startled, and my sight grew dim and I was almost fainting. I then found myself comfortably sitting on a big damask sofa with Juhaila gently offering me something to drink. She gave me a glass filled with an amber-colored liquid, and I drank it without any hindrance. That drink had no smell. It tasted strange, but soon a sense of well-being came over my body. Juhaila's voice created pleasant sensations in my mind. My curious sight went to the walls of that house, and they ran up and down the room. There were many paintings portraying geometric subjects hanging on white walls. They possessed an incredible evocative power and looked really mysterious and had a peculiar relevance to color. The well-disposed furniture looked very old, if not antique, and there was an inlaid writing desk which looked really, really precious. Everything was inspiring restraint and elegance. Just in front of a big window there was a wonderful black grand piano. Meanwhile, Juela had sat on an easy chair in front of me, and when she started to talk, Dehusha and Sewell came in, talking to each other at a low voice, and sat down on the other sofa near the front door. Hi, Shalaha. With her gentle voice, Joella told me Dehusha had important work at an embassy, which she did not tell me which country, and she was a researcher in a well-known laboratory that I cannot mention. So isn't that phenomenal that, these beings, they are just completely, um, they are completely within our society. They're completely involved, and you would never know at a supermarket checkout if you're actually looking at an alien. You wouldn't know if you're getting served by someone at a petrol bowser if they're an alien. This is how phenomenal and how crazy and wonderful our world is. She added to me that Dehusha and her were not married. On their planet, unions do not require rituals, only elective and physical and astral affinities. They can harmoniously split up if evolution frequency changes happen in the couple, and children are protected by the community anyway. Their connection was only for operative purposes, but they had common interests and worked well together. They had been on Earth for almost 80 years. When I showed my amazement, she said that they had the possibility to change their identity, their physical state, their nationality, and their state, but she did not want to give me more details. So these people do not age. Thinking about it, one thing became clear to me. Their peculiar dynamic molecular composition and metabolism could adapt to our environment only for a limited period. If they exceeded their exposure to Earth's frequencies, they could suffer very bad or deadly consequences. In fact, they were about to leave our world and go back to theirs. Dehusha's deep voice resounded in the room. He started to talk about music and colors, DNA and frequencies. Sounds, he said, keywords, music, and expressions of speech are genetically codified frequencies. Your DNA contains a programmed syntax which can be modified and reacts to modulated impulses. If I cast in you some frequencies through colors, words, or music, I can change key bodies in your genetic code. Reprogramming them, this is called genomic engineering, in science. So this is what, some people on Earth are doing. Reprogramming them and making them react to new dynamic sequences. I can change all the information contained in DNA by capturing the schematic hologram of a peculiar code and retransmit it to another one. Through sound and color dynamics, it is possible to reprogram cells. Through sound and color dynamics, information is contained in the DNA that can be transmitted through words because languages possess the codified memories of the entire universe. In that DNA, of which 90% is considered useless by your scientists, creation maps are contained. They are multi-dimensional networks through which cosmos or the cosmic universe interacts with infinitesimal quantities. Within a short time, men on Earth, in their silly creators' games, will start to physically draw and insert gene fractions, creating aberrations, monsters, and evil collateral effects that they will no longer be able to prevent nor dominate. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar right now? For this reason, we hope men of Earth could develop a new sense of responsibility and an honest effort to gain superior knowledge. That speech sounded really impressive, but I was diverted by a new external factor. From the hall came a scent that made everybody turn to a tray that Juela had in her hands. Honestly, I must say that apart from their inviting perfume, those pancakes did not have a good appearance. They were about 3 inches long. They looked dark and wrinkled. They were made like they were made with legume flour. I tasted one and I had to change my mind. It was absolutely delicious. Those cakes were compact like almond paste but much lighter, and their softly bitter taste reminded me of something I knew but could not recall. Juela was busy going in and out of the hall, bringing new dishes she carefully put on a table. There were also many good but mysterious drinks. I remembered I sipped something of a tamarind red color, violet scent, and had a wonderful taste I could not compare to anything. Sewell, coming close to me, said that their food was produced by seeds and plants that they had in their laboratory greenhouse. He asked me if I wanted to see it, and obviously I said yes. So, um, while Sewell added, sounds you heard can rarely be perceived by human ears. Um, I tried to absorb everything the two men were saying while my host Juela, who was an exquisite hostess, brought in some more food. On a tray, a large tray, there were some beautiful canapes. I tasted them, and it reminded me of vegetables, but had a meat-like compactness. I remained puzzled because people who claimed to have met aliens always said that they were absolutely vegetarians. Then I took the courage and asked them about it. Juela zealously answered. She said, "It's good fish. Also, in Clarion's oceans, there is very good fish, and we cook it in many different ways, just like you do here on Earth." But my perplexity remained. Did they eat meat? Sewell answered my thought. "We avoid doing it," he said. "Our metabolisms get primal energy and satisfy our body needs directly from our stars." I remembered he told me that Clarion had two sons. We mainly consume simple elements like vegetables, cereals, and many of them are very similar to those existing on this planet. Some of them are just the same because, as you know, many terrestrial plants were imported here from other planets. We eat some fish, and we could also eat other animal elements if it was necessary, but it is not. There is nothing bad in it. If you have a physical body, also if it is atomically different, you need to feed yourself, and it does not mean killing at all. You kill when you uselessly destroy other living forms for no surviving reasons. Juela intervened. Feeding is a part of evolutionary law. Everything transforms into an immense generator flux to begin and to be again and again. In creation, the balance of life and death follow each other unceasingly. Present is fed by past and future. Present is fed by past, and future will be fed by present in an eternal becoming. Those who consider eating animal species a sin perhaps have deep personality conflicts. They do not completely accept themselves in their own thinking form. They have a morbid will about purification, and perhaps they consider it dirty and unhealthy. The same happens with sexuality, acts which are, in fact, in reality, biologically normal. It is to impoverish, destroy, or extinguish living forms for no reasons. The real sin is to eat in excess, to crave superfluous goods, reducing to starvation in other human beings. There are worlds and spheres, untouchable dimensions, where lords of life are. You define spiritual those worlds and spheres because those who live there are nourished by the universal fires, by galactic waves and star songs. On the other hand, those who still live in material worlds must dignify inferior species by giving them a chance to grow up and turn into something superior. Joella had talked with passion, until then a feeling I had not noticed in my space visitors. I had convinced myself that their acts in the night of my abductions had increased my impression that they totally lacked feelings and emotions, but now I was no longer sure of it. In the sound of her voice, I was perceiving a mixture of sadness and suffering, a silent and discreet pain. I suddenly needed to smoke a cigarette, an unexpected and spasmodic, stupid, inappropriate need. Also, this is not a part of our habits, Sewell anticipated me. Of course, we are not scared by one cigarette or by its presumed lethal consequences. We are used to fighting. Oops, are we still live? We are not. We are used to fighting much more dangerous effects of all poisoning products you release on your planet. We can correct and re-establish the cell's balance and hormonal diseases in a very easy way, so we could smoke with no problems. Of course, it is a bad habit. You possess many and worse ones. A psychological dependence caused by your person in a deceiving way can give you a temporary escape from your anxiety, an artificial relax, and a false self-confidence, a fictitious sense of control over an existence you live too passively. As you can understand, we do not need to smoke, but if it is important for you, you can smoke. You are allowed to do it. Suddenly, I felt as stupid and like a confused child who has lost his ice cream. My need for tobacco vanished on my idiotic smile. So I found that actually quite funny. So they're at the house. They are at the house. They are cool made up stories. Honey, it's not made up. This is somebody's experience. So, Sewell said again, "Do you want to visit our greenhouse?" reminding me of his former invitation. I accepted with enthusiasm, while Joella gave me another glass of the tamarind-like drink. "Are we going?" Dahusha said, joining us. Okay, so below the piano, a button was pressed and the floor opened up. A narrow triangular passage had opened in the soil, and in it, illuminated by an undefinable source of light, I could see smooth steps going underground. Dahusha, and Sewell went down first, and I went before Joella, facing the unknown again. There were no more than 12 steps, and it turned to the left, leading to a little surrounding area. From there, a tunnel carved in the rock went down a slight slope, deeper and deeper. It was 6 feet high, less than 3 feet wide, and we took it walking one behind the other. High on the walls, there were regularly spaced neon lamps illuminating the tunnel with a milky luminescence. I could not say how deep we went. I remember we walked for several minutes before arriving to a strongly illuminated dome-shaped space. It was an immense place in which its structure, totally built in the wonderful transparent material, permitted me to see the external rock enwrapping it. Innumerable sections intersected that place, and each one contained infinite quantities and qualities of plants, herbs, colors that I've never seen before, vegetables that I've never seen before, were set in their places in a beautiful and mysterious order. Sometimes Joella, sometimes Sewell informed me about one plant or another, while Dahusha was controlling, I suppose, temperatures and living conditions of each plant. Many monitors between sections were continuously transmitting data of an indecipherable sequence of unknown signs. Ideograms, symbols, graphs appeared and disappeared in an alternate frequency immediately replaced by others. While I was observing, all that I noticed was a strange phenomenon created in the ground pieces by bell shaped reflectors. I could see some ruffling of those farming molds like vibrating waves, which radiated from the center to the borders, forming concentric circles, spirals, and spheroids. They were continuously changing geometrical forms equal to those I had seen on crop circle photographs. I remembered that those figures appeared on wheat, barley, and many other cultivations. I was uselessly trying to understand how crop circles could be related to the geometric figures I was seeing when Dehasha said, "What you are seeing is only a visible effect of a very complex and delicate process to transfer and insert genetic codes from plant to plant, modifying their chromosomes. We have holographic transmitters on our vehicles and cast these geometric figures on your fields by plasma vortexes, which makes the ground resonate. The geometric figures are nothing more than archetypal pictures of single genes. Through these unified field projectors," he said, indicating the bell shaped reflectors, "a plant's DNA is synthesized, recoded, and projected into carrying geometry that it is the new disposition or configuration of primal elements." So that is phenomenal. So that is Maurizio down in their greenhouse laboratory checking out all their different fruits and vegetables on one of his encounters. And so I believe that, I mean, what this book is just full of so much information. But obviously, like I said, the translation is not the best, but you will still, you know, if you love the story as much as I do, you will still be able to understand and get the gist of this. And if you go to his website, you can see the phenomenal pictures that he has taken. Hi, pretty. So yes. Anyway, yeah, that's, I mean, this is just phenomenal. Like, this encounter is one of the best that I love to read about. I did love reading and seeing about the friendship case, but as I said earlier, it's very hard to find information on that. It's usually the old cases that I love the most because, the old ones, they weren't around when we had technology, like the Albert Coe one, which I may get into in the future. I actually did read some of Albert Coe's before online, and I think it got flagged. I can't remember. And it's phenomenal. It is, because this happened all before technology, and it was just such a phenomenal encounter. And the chance meeting of this Venusian man who happened to be like 600 years old and looks like an 18-year-old is unbelievable. So I hope you enjoyed this, little file about Maurizio Cavallo. This is his book called Beyond the Heavens. There's a couple more, but they're in Italian. So if you speak or understand Italian, you would get a good read, because I don't believe there's any English translations for those. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Love you guys. And until next time, I send you my blessings, and may you always, always be blessed by the supreme truth and love of the cosmos. Know what you are. Know that you are the dust of the cosmos. That is what you are. Love you guys.